Okay, and I will be posting these up under the chapter modules. Okay, so we've talked about the statements and auditing standards that are for non-issuers. There are hundreds of those. There's roughly about 20 PCAOB standards which cover public companies. And sometimes students will say, well, why would there be so fewer standards for public companies than for non-public companies? It's counterintuitive. Well, for the most part, what the PCAOB does is they say, follow the non-public company standards, follow the SAS standards when you're auditing a non-public company, auditors, follow the SAS standards, and then we'll tell you when we want you to do something different, and in most cases, it's something more than what you would do for a public company. So classic example is for a public company, there is a requirement that we give an opinion on management's assertions about the internal control for public companies. Now, SAS for non-public companies does not have that requirement. So that's why PCAOB did what? They've written additional standards that expand on, that have special requirements for public companies, but they still want you to do some of the other things that you would be doing for non-public companies. So for many cases, we'll see that we'll be talking about the standards that are required, and we'll call out an AUC, or we'll say the Auditing Standards Board requires this, and you'll say, well, what about public companies? If we don't talk about something different or additional for public company, then you can assume that the non-public company rule also applies to the public companies. Okay. Okay, good. Now, when we get into, and I want to say it's Audit 6, okay, we'll start talking about what happens if you're auditing an entity that receives federal financial assistance. State and local governments receive federal financial assistance, and not-for-profits receive federal financial assistance. If that's the case, you have to follow generally accepted government auditing standards, abbreviated GAGAS. Those are issued by the office that I worked for 26 years, the Government Accountability Office. Federal agency, reports to Congress, but they also write the auditing standards that are to be followed entities who receive money from the federal government, which of course would be all federal agencies, but also state and local governments get money from the federal government. That's why you hear sometimes President Trump gets mad at a state and they say, I'm going to cut off the funding to him, which I don't think he has the authority to do that. But when funding comes from the federal government attaches to that the ability to audit the activities of those entities that receive that federal financial assistance. Most state and local governments do, but many, many not-for-profits do as well. So when you audit those entities, you audit according to GAGAS. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as Yellow Book. We'll get into that in Audit 6. Okay. We'll talk about attestation standards a little bit later. Attestation standards come up when we are doing examination of something other than the historical financial statements. So auditors can give attestation to things that don't necessarily relate to the financial statements. Much of what we talk about on the auditing exam in this class is going to be in relation to the audit of the financial statements, but we are going to have to start to consider other types of engagements where auditors can give an attestation as to the fairness of other types of information that aren't embodied in historical financial statements. And we'll talk more about that when we get to those. Sometimes an auditor can provide assurances that are less than the opinion that you get on the financial statements. We'll give something called negative assurance. And with negative assurance, we don't tell you what our opinion is about something. We simply tell you that we're not aware of problems, which is a lesser level of assurance than you would get with the positive assurance that you receive an opinion when the auditor says, in our opinion, XYZ, okay, where we give a positive assurance. So that comes up when we haven't audited information, and these apply to non-issuers. So typically we're not going to give this type of assurance for issuers, and so we would do that for non-issuers. And you can see the nature of some of the engagements, okay, compilation, review, etc. Okay, this will be much later on in Audit 6. Code of Professional Conduct going to come up in Audit 6. Okay, and we say that it controls members of the ICPA, but it actually controls all CPAs, because what happens is most state boards of accountancy, for example, the California State Board of Accountancy will say, we'll take your license from you if you don't follow California's Code of Conduct. And what California's Code of Conduct does is mirror to a large extent the Code of Conduct of the AICPA. So under those circumstances, then if you want to keep your license, you're going to be ending up covering or following this Code of Professional Conduct, and fairly light area on the exam, but we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about quality control standards for CPA firms, and that covers the entire firm and the nature of their engagements. And I think we get into that at the beginning of A2. Okay, so just a sense of some of the standards. If I had to look at this and say, where's the meat and potatoes here? We're going to start talking about that today. It's going to be right here, right? What are the requirements for audits of financial statements? That's where good 90% of your points are going to come from on the exam, or on audits of financial statements covered by those standards. Okay, question? Okay, good, guys. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this first class question. And we've been using the poll, and I think I want to go ahead and keep doing that. We did that in the other class, and I thought it worked out in the financial class, so I thought it worked out well. Unfortunately, I don't have a poll. Sorry, guys, I thought it was in there. But give me 1 second. Get to see the behind the scenes workings now of what I'm doing here. So I'm going to make it multiple choice. Answer 1 will be A. Answer 2 will be B. Answer 3 will be C. CPA exam, 4 option questions. For your multiple choice questions, it's only 4 options. Okay. So let me go ahead and save that. Okay, I guess I can close that now. And poll. Okay, what did I do wrong? It's not going to let me launch the poll. Okay. Type your question here. I'll try that one more time. Last question. Choose best answer. Okay, A, B, C, D. Save. Okay, I've saved the poll. I guess I can put this down now. And I'm going to try it one more time. There we go. Okay, good. So you can go ahead and choose the one that you think is best here. And if it's blocking your screen, you can just kind of move that over if you can't see the question. You have to control that on your end, just kind of scoot it over so you can see the question. Now, hopefully that pounding isn't because somebody got frustrated because they couldn't answer the question. Okay, let's go ahead and look at this one. It's not one that we need a whole lot of time with. So the answer here is C, okay? And so most of us got it right, okay? So that's good, okay? General guidance provided by the AICPA is going to be the correct answer. So let me go back though, because some of us missed it. Nobody thought that Journal of Accountancy, so that's good. Okay, but let's just go ahead. The answer is C here. Okay, this general guidance provided by the statements on auditing standards. Now, maybe the reason we had a little bit of trouble with that is I didn't stop here appropriately. Okay, so what happens? The standards issued by the AICPA, the SASs, and the PCAOB requirements, which weren't talked about on that question, are the most authoritative, right? But there are other things that they come out with that could be considered authoritative, such as interpretive publications, other auditing publications, and then you get down to the least authoritative down here, these other publications such as Journal of Accountancy articles, that sort of thing. I had an interesting conversation in that there was some question about what a student had cited as a source for some of their information. And I pointed out in the committee that I was sitting on that was looking at what the student had done, I pointed out, well, if the student quoted a Journal of Accountancy article, that doesn't constitute any kind of plagiarism for their research paper because Journal of Accountancy article is seen as authoritative. It's a question of they just had to make sure and cite where they got it. The fact that they took some from a Journal of Accountancy article is fine because it is seen as authoritative. It's just not as authoritative as what? As a PCAOB or a SAS standard, but a student could answer a research question from any of these authoritative sources as long as, of course, they don't, they cite the source correctly and just don't lift comments from there and not cite the source. And so SAS would be the most authoritative, but maybe you can get some insight from an interpretive publication. And if there's nothing there, maybe even, a periodical like the Journal of Accountancy. Okay, but that question that we looked at was calling out what is the most authoritative? Most authoritative is what is going to be the statements on auditing standards. Okay. Now, what made this one wrong is interpretations, because interpretations are less authoritative than what? Than the SAS is. But notice what they did to you here. Okay. And here they put AICPA down here, and you think, well, AICPA, anything they write is the most authoritative. No, they have the interpretations, they have other things. The most authoritative thing that the AICPA comes out with is what? Is the statements on auditing standards. Okay, those are issued by the AICPA, and those were on our list as most authoritative. So, couple of takeaways from this very first question that we've looked at here. First off, remember, guys, we're trying to get through the CPA exam. We're not here to set any records for how quickly we answer a question. We're trying to get these answers right. We want to strive for 75, get a 75 on the exam, but we take the strategy of getting 90% on the multiple choice questions. If you get 90% on your multiple choice questions and there's 50 points that come from multiple choice times 0.9, that's what? That's 45 points right there. You now only need what? 30 more points to pass the exam to get you that score of 75. So you sit there and you say, well, if that's a 75, then that means of the 50 points that are provided from the task-based simulations, okay, of the 50 points, I only need to get 30 from there 30 divided by 50 is what again? 80%? 3 divided by 5, and I don't do anything without my calculator. 3 divided by 5, right, is 80%? No, sorry, 60%. That's why I'm glad I always check. That's 60%. That's D-level work that you could be doing on a task-based simulation and still pass the exam. So we've got to be very good at how we go through our multiple choice questions, okay? If you can work those at 90%, then you're going to be in good shape to be able to do still decent work, but you don't have to be perfect. You have a much wider margin for error on your task-based simulations, and that's good because those tend to be a little tougher, right, than the multiple choice questions, okay? But a couple things here. So AICPA guidance, you can't read the first choice and say, oh, AICPA, I'm done. I'm not going to read the rest of it. Because then you would continue to read and you might, none of you want a journal of accountancy because you say, well, that's just an article in a journal, so I'm not going to go with that. General guidance on statement on auditing standards, and when you read that, you'd say, well, wait a minute, I thought the AICPA wrote the statements on auditing standards, so these both couldn't be right. Oh yeah, that's right, SASs are more authoritative than industry guidance, that kind of thing, okay? And then you look and they say, what, specific guidance, and notice what they do to you there. They make that sound more important by using the word specific versus general, but then when you read, it's an interpretation, not the standard itself, okay? So that's how we're going to have to attack these questions. The auditing exam is not that difficult. It's just that they use certain phraseology. The wording of the questions is such to make the right answer sound wrong and the wrong answer sound right. That using general versus specific is a trick to try to bait you into thinking that D is the correct answer. Okay, question? Okay, good. Let's go ahead then. And let's start talking about the audit engagement, the audit process, overview of the audit process, etc. And we're going to be covering on many of these different parts later. And there are questions that are answered by knowing what part of the engagement you're on. Okay, so they'll say something that is clearly an initial planning step. And so they'll say, which of the following should the auditor do in the initial planning? Well, obviously, we're not issuing a report in the initial planning phase because the report is where? Is down here at the bottom, right? Okay, the initial planning's going to involve engagement acceptance, that sort of thing. Okay, so sometimes it is helpful to look at the question, understand the phase of the engagement to understand which of the choices would be best. Okay, now having said that, we are going to start here tonight. We are literally starting at the end. Okay, and the reason we provide you the information this way is it's going to help you understand why we're doing the things that we're doing on this higher level steps, because we're trying to support this opinion on the financial statements. And so we're going to really focus on the opinion here in this very first class, get that under our belt. We're going to see that there's going to be some, unfortunately, memorization as to how these reports are constructed. I'm only asking to memorize the unmodified, unqualified opinions. And then after that, we're going to have some flashcards around how we will modify the unqualified, the unmodified opinion for various circumstances that come up. Okay, so we're really going to be focusing here. Now, let's understand a little bit about what the objectives of these audits are. Okay, and the objective of an audit is for us to provide an opinion as to whether the financial statements are following the applicable framework. Now, when we say applicable framework, that could be US GAAP, right? Could be what? US GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, but it could also be, for example, IFRS, okay? It just depends on what the entity has determined is the applicable framework for them. Obviously, if they're a public company, they have to follow US GAAP, okay? So it really depends on the company, but for the most part on the exam, applicable framework is going to be the US GAAP and IFRS standards. Okay, so what happens? The entity prepares the financial statements. The auditor is responsible for giving an opinion on those financial statements. So we don't prepare the statements, right? Management is responsible for preparing the financial statements. Auditor gives an opinion on those statements. And that opinion from the auditor, because we're going to be independent, is going to add credibility to those financial statements. Okay, so the financial statements are prepared by management, not by the auditor. The auditor simply adds credibility to those financial statements by doing the various tasks that we're going to talk about, and then issuing that opinion as the independent auditor. Okay, all right, good. Now you come over and we remind you management prepares the financial statements, and they are also responsible for design, implementation, and maintenance of the internal control. Internal controls are the things that help to prevent, detect error, misstatement in the financial statements. And so that's all management's responsibility. Auditor comes in, looks at those financial statements, does the audit procedures we're going to be talking about, and then issues an opinion as to whether those financial statements are prepared in accordance with the applicable framework, US GAAP, IFRS. And for a public company, we're also going to be required to give an opinion as to management's assertion about how they have executed their responsibility for the internal control. Okay. All right. Sometimes students will say, John, what's the difference between yellow and blue? And there is no difference. I just like to dip into other colors now and again. Okay. Or if there's a different thought, sometimes you'll see in a paragraph, they'll have the main thought, and then right under that, they'll have another line. They'll say, unless something or another. I might change the font so that you can kind of see the two conflicting, face-to-face statements that might be in one paragraph. Okay, now the auditor's responsibility. Let's take a look at that. And the auditor's responsibility is to give an opinion, as we've seen, on those financial statements. Okay, auditor's responsibility. We need to, of course, maintain professional skepticism. Okay, so we're going to give an opinion, but we have to maintain professional skepticism. So what is professional skepticism? Professional skepticism says you just don't trust what management says to you. Okay, you're going to have a questioning mind. And I give the example when I teach the regular auditing course here at GGU that I've been on engagements where the agency, the federal agency, HUD was famous for this, will just throw something out and they'll say, well, we couldn't do that particular procedure to make sure that there wasn't some problem with this particular housing agency because, and they make it up as they go along. And I don't know, maybe it's because I come from Hayward or something. I could just sense when somebody was telling me something that wasn't correct. And so I would always ask staff, well, let's take a look at that. I don't quite believe that that's the way that works. And so we would take a look, and that was often how we ended up having findings that the agency wasn't always complying with what the requirements were, because you just had that professional skepticism. Something they said just didn't sound right to you. Okay, you need to keep that questioning mind. Okay, so let's just go ahead and take a look at how you might actually exercise professional skepticism. What professional skepticism says is the evidence that they give me, oral evidence, even if it's documentary evidence, written evidence, I'm going to take a good hard look at that evidence to see if it passed the smell test. Is there something about it that makes me feel like I cannot rely on that evidence that's being given? So if there's audit evidence that contradicts other evidence you've obtained, information that calls into question the reliability of document, maybe they've given you some sort of forgery, maybe it took them forever to get you the audit documentation that you've asked for. Why did it take so long? This would heighten your professional skepticism. Okay, indications that may indicate possible fraud. Maybe you're being given some information, but you've seen some indications of fraud. For example, maybe there's excessive pressure on the entity to meet certain earning targets and whatnot. And we'll talk about fraud, I think, in Audit 3. Okay, circumstances suggest the need for further audit procedures in addition to those required by GAS. GAS is telling you the minimum things you should do, okay? But you may go ahead and go beyond the requirements of GAS. Maybe you'll take a larger sample size than is indicated by using the guidance that's given in GAS for sample sizes, because you have this concern about maybe there being some intentional misstatement, et cetera. Okay, so when we think about professional skepticism, it's not, I think what happens is we tend to say, management's lying and I can tell they're lying. It's not so much that as it is being diligent about the evidence. It's about the evidence that you're receiving and seeing if that evidence is meeting your expectations as to its veracity. And if not, you're going to start to take some additional steps. Okay, good. Ethical requirements. Okay, when we do an audit, we have to follow the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct. And again, as I've stated, in the state of California and many states here, they pattern their own regulatory requirements after the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct. I can't speak for all boards of accountancy. I know California, that's the case, because I actually presented an ethics class and saw and actually talked about the similarities between the AICPA Code of Professional Conduct and the California Accountancy Act that calls out the particular codes of conduct for CPAs in the state of California. Okay, and we'll talk about those. I think in Audit 6, we finally get to the Code of Professional Conduct. Okay, now coming over to the next page, important phrase you need to get used to: reasonable assurance. Okay, we do not give absolute assurance. Okay, we give reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free of misstatement, whether caused by error or fraud. So the auditor is not a guarantor, or whatever, how we pronounce that, of the financial statements. Okay, the auditor provides reasonable assurance. Why do we limit it to reasonable assurance? Two major factors. One, we don't do 100% sample, 100% testing. So we will have to rely on samples, and there's always a chance that the results of a sample would be different than if we had looked at the entire population. That's just, any science has to deal with that. So there's always potential that we would not detect a misstatement for that reason. The other problem is the concealment aspects associated with fraud. So auditors don't have an S on their chest that says super auditor, okay? No, there could be the situation that we have those in management or employees who are frankly slicker than we are. And we are not here to guarantee that we're going to catch every instance of fraud. Now, that does not mean that we can just go ahead and get sloppy, because we have to provide what? Reasonable assurance, but it is not absolute assurance. Okay. Okay, good. Now, again, as we look at standards, we will see that standards will apply to non-issuers and to issuers. Again, as I've mentioned, the requirements for issuers point to a large extent to the requirements for non-issuers, but there are things that issuers have when we audit public companies that we have to do that we would not necessarily have to do for non-public companies. Again, classic example is internal control. The other thing that we're going to see for this class, giving an opinion on internal control that you are required to for a public company versus non-public. And then specific to this chapter, we're going to see that the reports are structured a little bit differently. This is one of these things that, to me, they should just get on the same page and have the reports basically the same, but they didn't. And there's no requirement that the AICPA follow the PCAOB or vice versa. So they put the burden on you, my friend. You're going to have to sit there and understand the difference in the structure of the report between the issuers and non-issuers. Meanwhile, the intent of the report, the adding the credibility and reliability of the financial statements to the auditor's opinion, is the same, but they've just structured the reports differently. I think They should get together and pick one format for the report and go with that, so we don't have to say, if I'm doing a non-public company, I do this. If I'm doing a public company, I do that. The report on the financial statements, I don't know why they can't make them the same, but they haven't. So we have to understand the structure of the reports, and that's going to be one of our major pains tonight, is understanding the difference in the structure of the reports for issuers versus non-issuers, public company versus non-public company. Okay, and then again, not only do we have to see the report on the financial statements for issuers, we also have to understand the report on internal control, but we'll get to that in a different lecture. We won't talk about that tonight. So the main thing we're talking about tonight is the opinion on the financial statements, and unfortunately, the structure, the intent of those reports is the same. The structure of the reports is different if we're talking about an issuer versus a non-issuer. We're going to have to understand those differences, okay? But as I've said, the objectives are the same, okay? So we're going to do what? We're wanting to give an opinion on the financial statements. That's the same, both issuers and non-issuers. But then when we do the audit on management's assertion as over internal control, that is required for issuers. Some non-issuers will want that work done, but that is not required. That is an optional piece of work. So non-issuers do not have to have an opinion on their internal control, but if they want to, they can do that. Okay, issuers must. Non-issuers, it's optional. And then this paragraph that I highlighted here talks about government entities. Very rare. It is very rare that government entities give an opinion on their internal control. It comes up when the agency itself, there's no federal regulation that requires it. On occasion, the agency itself will decide that they would like an opinion on their internal control. Comes under the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Public companies are required to do this. And so some federal agencies believe that they would also like that kind of scrutiny of their internal control done and can request that their auditors give an opinion on the internal control. But that is fewer and far between. Very few federal agents do that. And I don't know of any state and local governments that ask for this. They are not required to under the auditing standards issued by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. They're not required to do that, and I don't know of any that choose to do that. That to me would be an interesting project for state and local governments to take on, or maybe somebody like the Association of Governmental Accountants to take on something like that, to start to have that requirement. I mean, why not? If we're sitting here and we're saying that public companies have to issue an opinion on their internal control, why wouldn't entities that are expending public funds, taxpayer dollars, have to have an opinion on their internal control? It is rare at the federal level. I have not seen it at the state and local level. Yet, if you receive federal financial assistance, you could be required. There will be a report on the internal control, but not an opinion on the internal control. So anyway, it is required for our purposes now, reining it back in a little bit closer to what we're talking about for the CPA exam. Key thing to remember right now, opinion on internal control required for public companies, not required for non-public companies, for non-issuers. Okay. Okay, good. So let's take a look, and let's look at our next class question here. I'll give you a few seconds to work that one. Okay, most of you had a chance to look at this. And guys, I think for the auditing questions, especially some of these in the first few chapters, I'll probably give you about 2 minutes to work the question. For the FAR class, we were giving 3 minutes. I think 2 minutes is probably about right for some of these questions. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end the polling and I'm going to share the results with you. And yeah, most of you got this right. The answer is C. Okay, and the key thing to keep in mind about professional skepticism is we're thinking about what is the evidence. We're really questioning the veracity, the reliability of the evidence that we've received in support of the financial statements, right, and supporting our opinion. So we say, which of the following is not an application of professional skepticism, designing additional procedures to see if we can get more reliable evidence that is very much focused on evidence, right? So that's going to be that's going to be an application of professional skepticism. So that's not the right answer. Obtaining corroboration of management's explanations through consultation with a specialist, and this will probably make more sense to you as we go along, but sometimes we're on an audit and we are asked to understand something that's not our area. I was on an audit one time of the U.S. Forest Service, and we have to talk about the inventory. And we look, and all you have for inventory is a bunch of trees. Well, how do I know what the number of board feet is that is in the forest? And so we engaged a specialist person that's able to look at the general health condition of the trees and give you some sense as to how many board feet of lumber are in a forest, so we could opine on the inventory. So you just don't rely on what management says. You get additional evidence that is corroborated by a specialist, again, increasing our ability to rely on that evidence and make sure we're getting behind management's comments. Okay, inquiring a prior year engagement personnel regarding their assessment of management's honesty and integrity. Now, this sounds like a professional skepticism, but this is much more of an engagement issue. Before you engage a client, okay, you're going to want to understand something about their integrity. And we're going to talk more about specific requirements that you have to do before you can accept a client. And many of them are centered around management's integrity, because we want to avoid accepting a client whose management lacks integrity. But that has nothing to do with getting behind evidence, the veracity of evidence, okay? When we're applying professional skepticism, we are further along than just having accepted that client. So the answer here, and most of us got it right, is C, okay, is C, and that we're going to not have this part of our professional skepticism, even though we would do this. And then using third-party confirmation from third party, yeah, that is what providing support for management's representations, again, adding veracity to management's representation to us by getting an independent third-party confirmation. Okay. Okay, good. Stop me if there's a question, guys. Otherwise, I'm going to roll to the next section. Okay, now this is where we're going to spend most of our points right here. Again, as I mentioned, the opinion, the reporting requirements around the financial statements, 10 points. Okay, I promise you, a bunch of multiple choice questions, bunch of, not a bunch, but task-based simulation or two in this area. You've got to know this. There is no way to get through the auditing exam without understanding what these reports are going to look like, what they mean when you see certain words associated with these reports. Okay, now that's the news. The good news in this is that once you kind of get this stuff down to some flashcards, it's pretty easy. Okay, the bad news is you are going to have to do some memorization. But once you get the cards down, you get the cards straight in your head, and you start to apply it to the questions, this 10 points of material actually becomes a pretty easy 10 points of material for you. Okay, so let's just go ahead. I'm not going to read all of that introduction because it tends to repeat some of the things we've already talked about. I just want to go straight to this. I call it the grapefruit here, okay, where we're going to sit here and we're going to start to understand some of the terminology around these financial, around these various types of reports, okay, that we can give on the financial statements, okay? So they've used green, yellow, and red here. Green is good, red is bad, yellow is caution. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna do it a little differently, and I'm gonna use some faces here, okay? So what happens? And these faces represent the emotion of the auditor, okay? So that's the auditor right there. And the auditor is what? Is happy when we issue an unmodified, unqualified opinion, okay? That means that we do not believe there is a material misstatement in the financial statements, okay? The auditor is happy. If that's the case, the auditor will give, and the reason we have two words there, it's unmodified for our non-issuers, our non-public companies. It's called unqualified when we talk about our public companies. And sometimes that word unqualified can confuse you because you say, well, if I get a letter for a job I've applied for and they say I'm unqualified, I should be sad. If the opinion is unqualified, that's good, okay? So let me give you an example. Let's say, and just a silly example, let's say you have a friend that's going for a job interview and your friend says, hey, I'd like you to come and check out the outfit I'm going to wear tomorrow for my job interview. So you say, okay, fine. You go over and your friend comes out in the outfit, okay? Suit, shirt, shoes, perfect. That you look good. You just gave them an unqualified, unmodified opinion. There's nothing materially wrong with that outfit. That's a great outfit for you, right? Suit color for an interview, everything, right? So you just gave them an unmodified, unqualified opinion on their suit, okay? Well, it works the same way for financial statements. If we look at the financial statements and it looks like they've done everything according to the applicable framework, US GAAP, IFRS, we can give them an unmodified, unqualified opinion. The auditor is happy, okay? Now, the way this chart works, you either go one way or the other. You're not going to be on both sides of the chart at the same time, okay? You're going to be, at least for CPA exam purposes, you're going to sit here and you're going to say, hey, I'm either on this side of the report of the, whatever you call this thing, the pendulum, whatever, or I'm on the other side, okay? This side is GAAP issues. This side is gas issues. Now, when I say gas issues, I mean generally accepted auditing standards issues, okay? Audit issues, okay? So when we start to get away from this green happy opinion, we start to stray away from it because there was either problems that we saw with the financial statements or there were problems with what we were able to accomplish through our audit procedures, okay? Now, let's just go ahead and let's deal with the GAAP issue side first. And again, a lot of the questions expect you to know which side of this thing you're on, okay? You're either on this side or this side when you go through, okay? So if we have a qualified opinion, now we're gonna put a sad face on this auditor, okay? Now this auditor is sad because there was something that generally accepted accounting principles said should be included in the financial reports, or it should have been presented, or there was a number that was incorrect in the financial statements that the auditor believes materially misstates the financial statements. So the auditor is sad. The auditor is saying there's a material misstatement in these financial statements, okay? If that's the case, the auditor issues a qualified opinion, because now you're not saying, hey, unqualified, I promise the financial statements are okay. You're going to say the financial statements have a problem, and here's what it is. That's called a qualified opinion, and you could qualify for GAAP issues here, okay? So let's just go back to your buddy's suit, okay, that's going for the job interview, and they come out, suit and everything is good, but when you get down to the shoes, they're wearing a pair of Air Jordans. They're wearing tennis shoes. And you say, what shoes are you going to wear to the job interview? And they say, oh, I'm going to wear these. Well, why? Oh, well, you know, I think I want to look like I'm an independent thinker or something. No, you cannot wear those shoes to that interview. Your suit is fine. So you say your outfit looks good except for the shoes, and you call out the material problem with their outfit. You just qualified your opinion. US GAAP says there's supposed to be a green elephant on every page of the financial statements. They don't put a green elephant on every page of the financial statements. You'll say, in my opinion, the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with the applicable framework, except for, and you call out whatever the problem is, the green elephant, whatever it is. That is a GAAP qualification. The auditor is sad. The auditor is not happy with that. Okay. Now, when your GAAP problems go from bad to worse, now, not only is the auditor sad, but the auditor is crying. Now our GAAP issues have gone from bad to worse, okay? And it's a matter of the pervasiveness of the problem. How deep is the problem? So the same problem that maybe could have resulted in a qualified opinion, if it gets very pervasive, if the dollar amount of the misstatement gets larger, or the amount of the non-compliance with GAAP gets deeper and more entangled, then the auditor can go from qualified to adverse. And it is a matter of professional judgment. The standards don't say, at this dollar amount of misstatement, you must go from qualified to adverse. It becomes a matter of professional judgment. How pervasive does the GAAP problem start to be before we go from a GAAP qualification to a GAAP adverse, okay? So let's just go back to your buddy's outfit. And, you know, your buddy, you say, come look at my outfit. And you show up and they come out in a sweat outfit. And you say, you know, a nice jogging suit, you know. You say, so what suit are you going to wear? I'm going to wear this. See how nice it is? Well, look, it's a nice jogging suit. You might look good walking through the park with that, but do not wear that to the job interview. If you wear that to the job interview, you're going to get thrown out of the building before you ever get up there because of that outfit you're wearing. Okay, so what happens? Now you've given an adverse opinion. So if there's so many problems with the financial statements, or the one problem is so bad that it now has tipped you all the way to adverse, that's how you go from GAAP qualification to adverse. Okay, now you come over to the other side and notice that as we move away from the unmodified, unqualified opinion, we use the word now qualified again for the gas issue side of our little chart here, a little scale here, whatever, okay? So what happens? Well, now there was some audit procedure that we couldn't apply that did not allow us to give an unmodified, unqualified opinion on the financial statements. Go back to your buddy's outfit. Your buddy comes out, beautiful suit, everything, socks look good, but no shoes. And you say, well, what shoes are you going to wear to the job interview? And the buddy says, oh, yeah, I know. I got to get a nice pair of shoes. I'm going to pick those up on the way to the job interview. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. Well, now you'd give a scope qualification, a gas qualification. You'd say, okay, your outfit looks fine, except for what I would have been able to tell you about the shoes had you had them available today for me to see, to make my judgment as to whether or not those are appropriate for the interview, right? You can't give an unmodified opinion if you haven't seen a material element of your buddy's outfit here. Shoes are a pretty material, important part of an outfit, especially for a job interview, right? I went to a agency meeting one time, and I was on travel, and I ran out of socks. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to wear a pair of, gym socks, these short gym socks. That'll be fine. I'll just wear those socks. Nobody will see my socks because we're going to be sitting at a table. I'm thinking my feet will be under the table. No one will see my socks. Of course, they had to sit on a couch for that meeting with the agency. So now there's my stupid white short gym socks there. So ruined my whole game plan, right? So the socks are important. The shoes are important to an outfit. If you're going to go to a job interview, you don't know. Maybe they're going to have you sitting at a couch where everyone's going to see your shoes, right? Okay. So shoes can be an important part of an outfit. They are an important part of an outfit, and that could cause you to want to qualify your opinion about your buddy's outfit. Well, let's say the general accepted auditing standards say that you are supposed to get a third-party verification of some information, a confirmation, and you weren't able to get that confirmation. Well, that would be enough of an issue that could cause you to say, in my opinion, the financial statements are fairly stated, except for what I would have been able to tell you about the financial statements had I been able to apply that particular audit procedure. Now, just as we saw for the adverse, but notice we use a different word here, we use disclaimer, okay? If the nature of the procedure that we couldn't apply was so significant, so pervasive, that it did not allow us to even give a qualified, we would go from qualified to disclaimer here. And again, I'm going to put the eyes on the face of this auditor, but I'm not going to put a mouth, no mouth. And I put no mouth here is because the auditor isn't saying anything. In fact, what I'll put is shoulders instead. Those are the auditor's shoulders shrugging. The auditor is saying, I can't give you an opinion. I disclaim an opinion on these financial statements because there was an audit procedure that I couldn't apply, or there were so many audit procedures that I couldn't apply that I ended up shrugging my shoulders and telling you, I don't know if these financial statements are fairly stated, okay? Now, disclaimer comes up when my office, my former office, I've retired from there, the Government Accountability Office gives an opinion on the consolidated financial statements of the federal government. So one thing about working at home, I get to have props. So this was the first audit of the consolidated financial statements of the federal government. And they gave this to us after we had worked on this, and it looks beautiful, doesn't it? Meanwhile, what we ended up issuing was a disclaimer of an opinion on the financial statements. We disclaimed an opinion, and there are several reasons, and the GAO has never issued a anything less than a disclaimer of opinion, or anything better, I guess, than a disclaimer of an opinion on the financial statements of the federal government. Couple of problems. One, they can't get an audit on Department of Defense. And I'll ask students that sometimes, and people will say, oh, that's because it's top secret, right? No, because the Department of Defense can't get their financial statements together. They're good at blowing other people's stuff up, but they're not good at preparing their own financial statements or knowing where their assets are at any point in time. So when Department of Defense goes for their audit gets a disclaimer. And when a major subsidiary has a disclaimer, that often bubbles up into a disclaimer on the consolidated financial statements. In fact, you may see an example of that in your A1 simulation homework, where they're going to sit there and they're going to talk about how a disclaimer on a subsidiary could result in a disclaimer on the consolidated financial statements. Department of Defense is like a subsidiary of the federal government. The other problem is that the federal government can't get its balance sheet to balance. So there's always a $4 to $5 trillion plug that hits the balance sheet of the federal government to get it to balance. And the reason is they have a screwed up consolidation system. So what they do is they have one system up here that prepares that consolidated report that I'm just holding up. Meanwhile, they have 32 separate agency systems that prepare the agency statements. And then they go through this ridiculous process of trying to reconcile the two. And guess what? It doesn't work. Just like it wouldn't work if you sat there and took the consolidated statements and tried to back them into the individual company statements. That wouldn't work either, right? How do you do it? You start from the bottom, you do your eliminations up to your consolidated. Federal government doesn't do it that way, and therefore they can't get the balance sheet to balance. Okay, so if you're the auditor and there's a $4 trillion plug hitting the financial statements, you're probably going to have a pervasive enough problem that's going to lead you all the way to a disclaimer of opinion. Okay. Okay, so those are the types of opinions, and what we're going to do is we're going to spend some time here tonight now understanding the structure of the reports when you have these various circumstances. We'll start with the unmodified, and then we'll work our way forward from there, okay? But I'm figuring we're good for maybe, what, maybe 10-minute break right now? Okay, is there any questions? Okay, good, guys. I'm going to go ahead then and take a quick break.
Hi, Professor. I cannot hear you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Could you tell me the difference between audit, attestment, and engagement again?
Between audit and attest?
Audit, attestment, and engagement.
Well, both audits and attest engagements are engagements. Okay, so you mean audit and attest engagement. I see. Yeah. You're asking me the difference between those two things, audit and an attest engagement. And an audit is an attest. Okay. In other words, you are testifying. Now, back before people could read, an auditor would go out into the public square and audibly say out loud what their findings were. Thus, the term auditor. You would literally read out, speak out what your findings were. And you did this because many people were illiterate. Okay, so you testified, you were to be heard. Auditors are to be heard. So we talk about audits, but an audit is an attest. But we use the word audit when we're talking about auditing historical financial statements. If we're giving a testimony to something other than the historical financial statements, then we put that as an attest. We are testifying as to something other than the historical financial statements. So an audit is an attest engagement, but it's a specific type of attest engagement. And then you have other types of attest engagements that go beyond the historical financial statements, and we tend to call that just an attest engagement because it's not just covering the financial statements.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so let's just go ahead then. And any other questions before we get started with the things we've talked about so far? Okay, so again, our unmodified, unqualified opinion, that's the happy face up here, right? And we can see that that means the auditor believes that the financial statements present fairly in conformity with the applicable framework, US GAAP, IFRS, okay? And then the term unmodified is used for non-issuers. The term unqualified is used for issuers or public companies. And again, I express a little bit of frustration. I don't see that the investing public is helped at all by the fact that we have to use different names and structures for the way we will present this information for public versus non-public companies. But so be it. It is what it is, and we're just going to have to deal with it for the exam. Okay. And then, of course, when we modify our opinion, we could have qualified. And again, remember our chart, qualified. And remember, guys, you're on one side of the chart or the other, right? Qualify for gas reasons or qualify for GAAP reasons. But the exam is going to give you some questions where you're going to expect you to understand that as your GAAP problems go from bad to worse, we call that adverse. If your gas problems go from bad to worse, we call that disclaimer. But we have qualified on both sides of the chart. And then for our gap problems, we call it adverse. For our gas problems, we call it disclaimer. Okay. All right. So that was pretty much what we talked about just before the break here. So I think we're good to answer a couple of our class questions now.
I have a quick question. For these pass key boxes in the book, is there any merit to those in terms of if we should prioritize them for the test?
No, if I see something in a pass key that I think warrants special attention, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank
I
you.
don't tend to be in love with the pass keys. Sometimes they're good and I might point them out. Sometimes they're good and I don't point them out, but I don't think they're the end all be all.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to mention one thing. My husband took Becker many years ago, and what he told me is do exactly what they tell you to do, and you will pass the exam. So that's what I wanted to share with the class.
Okay, the question is who's they?
Becker.
Okay. Well, my name's John, and you do what I tell you to. Okay. But you will pass if you go through and you make the flashcards. You look at the flashcards the way I'm talking about, use them to apply them to answer the questions, and then do the final review steps and stuff. And I think that's what you're saying, right? So practice makes perfect.
Correct.
Or I don't know about perfect. Practice gets you to 75. That's what we're looking for here. 75 is as good as 100. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and take a look at this one now. And most of us got it right. Okay, the answer here is B. So 80% or so of us got it right. But let's just go ahead and take a look at the way this question worked. Okay. And so an auditor of a non-issuer concludes, that a client's illegal act has a material effect on the financial statements. Okay, now it's material. meaning we're not going to be able to issue an unmodified opinion, right? If we have a material problem, we can't issue an unmodified, so we could almost get rid of that right out of the gate, right? On the financial statements. Now, if it's affecting the financial statements, and they tell me, as I read on, that it has not been properly accounted for or disclosed, those are key words that are pointing me to what? We've got a gap issue, not a gas issue, okay? And remember, we said that what? Once we're on that side of the chart, we abandon the audit issue, the gas issue side. So we're no longer talking about qualified or disclaimer, okay? And there is no such thing as disclaimer or adverse. Those are on the opposite sides of the extreme for a gap problem versus a gas problem, okay? We are now what? Clearly on the gap side of that little grapefruit chart, and we now have to decide, we can't be unmodified, we're not in the green, we're now in the yellow or the red. We've got to decide whether or not we want to qualify for gap reason or what? Or give an adverse, depending on what? Depending on, as we said, the pervasiveness, how deep, how bad is that problem? Okay, is it just a small little thing? Well, it's, if I say small, it's big, it's material. Is it the whole body, or is it just one leg that's giving us a problem here? Even though it's material, how pervasive is it? Okay. Okay, so be careful, guys. I'm seeing a little bit of a trend here, maybe my imagination, but I'm seeing a tendency to just accept that first answer. That is not what we're here for. Okay, we're not here to pick up, you know, the 3 pounds and go, okay, get this out of my face, I tried. No, we're sitting here and we're working that muscle. We're trying to make it stronger. We're trying to go through the process here. So, you know, just picking the weight up and throwing it back down after 2 seconds is not going to get us there. You need to read through the questions. If you're still unclear, read back up through the question, understand what's going on with it, eliminate some of the bad ones, some of the obvious ones, and see if you can narrow this down to 50-50. Just don't pick that first answer and say, oh, that seems good enough for me, and put that down. That's not the exercise that we're doing here. This is not about just showing up to try to get an A in the class or whatever. This is about preparing for the battle, the CPA exam, get this thing out of the way. You are not going to have a better opportunity than this right here to get through this exam. So make sure you're putting the work in right now, right this minute today. Now is the moment, okay, that you're going to be working through these. Okay. Any question? Okay, good. Let's take a look then. Continuing on now, and we're going to focus on the unmodified opinion first, okay? So we're going to first talk about our non-issuers, then we're going to go ahead, I guess I can, what am I supposed to do? Close that poll, stop to share results, get that off your screen, okay? Okay, good. And let's just go ahead and let's take a look at the unmodified opinion. Unmodified is the word that we use when we're talking about non-issuers. When we're talking about issuers, we'll call it unqualified, okay? So I'm just gonna go over and turn straight over. I'm just gonna go straight over to the actual opinion, okay? Don't worry about all that table. That can get maddening there as you look at all that stuff. What I want you to do is just go straight to the report, and I'm going to ask you for some flashcards, okay? So I'm going to ask you for a flashcard for this, and just between us, we can call this the intro paragraph, okay? I want you to prepare that flashcard, okay? And what this does is say that we have audited, and it just starts to call out the various financial statements. So that's an intro just saying, hey, this is what we did. We audited these financial statements. Again, this is the unmodified opinion for our non-public companies, okay? Now notice we don't get very far in this, and we start calling out to you what management's responsibility is. Remember, we said management is responsible for the financial statements and preparing them in accordance with This is US GAAP, so we'll say generally accepted accounting principles in the United States of America. They're also responsible for what? The internal control, right? So right away, we put the responsibility of management out there versus the responsibility of the auditor. The auditor is responsible to plan, perform the audit following generally accepted standards in the United States of America. Those are our auditing standards, okay? Those are the AICPA SASs. When they say that, they're talking about AICPA SASs. We're going to see that when we look at the public company version of the, they call it unqualified for public companies, they're going to call out the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board rules. When they just give it that more sort of generic, generally accepted auditing standards in the United States of America, they're talking about the AICPA SASs. Okay. Now, when I put FC, that's flashcard. I want you to flashcard and memorize that whole paragraph. The what I'm calling intro paragraph, just to tip you off that that's that first paragraph. The management responsibility paragraph, you're going to write the whole paragraph on the flashcard. The blank side will say, you know, what is in the intro paragraph. Write all of that out. The second flashcard will say, what is the management responsibility paragraph. Write the whole thing out. Again, check your flashcards, guys, because there may already be flashcards in the ones Becker gave you that does that. If the Beck that you bought when you bought the materials for the class, you know, if they already have those, you don't have to redo it. You can just go ahead and use that card. But it should be written out in its entirety. I'm going to ask you to memorize this word for word. Management's responsibility, auditor's responsibility, and that auditor's responsibility paragraph probably going to require 2 flashcards. Okay, so I'm going to say flashcard times 2 because you probably won't be able to fit it on one. And then I want to point out something that looks like a no big deal down here, this little paragraph, one sentence paragraph by itself, but it is a very important paragraph because what it does is it trumpets the opinion paragraph that is coming, okay? Now it says this provides a basis for our audit opinion, and as long as they're not saying a qualified or a disclaimer or adverse opinion, that means it's unmodified, unqualified. I know that's annoying here, but why don't they just say my unmodified opinion? Instead, they say my opinion, the basis for my opinion. But if that says that there, then that means that the opinion is unmodified. If it's qualified, it'll say so in that little sentence. So that's kind of an important sentence because it's sort of trumpeting now what is going to come, which is the opinion, okay? And I want you to flashcard that. In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above in the intro paragraph are going to reflect the financial position, the balance sheet, the results of operations, the income statement, the cash flows for the year then and in accordance with, and again, they call out the generally accepted accounting standards in the United States of America, that's US GAAP, okay? Now they give you these bubbles, and I'm not going to waste time filling those bubbles in because I'm asking you to flashcard these, but just so you know, these bubbles, you know, adhere to these bolded words. And I'm not going to sit here and do an arts and crafts project. We're not in the 3rd grade here, so we don't need to sit here and fill this in right now. But they give you some mnemonic that I don't care about because I'm asking you to flashcard this whole thing, be able to memorize it. You should be able to go to dinner with somebody that you care a lot about, somebody you're deeply in love with, and look them in the eye and say, we have audited the company financial statements of ABC Company, and recite that to them like that. They'll say, oh, please say that to me again. And I just love it when you talk to me that way. You need to be able to recite that word for word. Okay, now here's why. Many of the questions that you see, particularly task-based simulation, they love this. They'll say, your staff drafted this report and you have been asked to provide comments, or you are the senior or the partner on the engagement, the supervisor has provided the staff some comments. Do you agree with the comments that they've given them, you know, and how the report was drafted? And that's an easy piece of cake, you know, points. You're going to crush that task-based simulation with time to spare if you've got this thing memorized, right? You can see that. If you don't have it memorized, you're going to be, oh, I don't know. It looks okay. It's not okay. I don't know. Geez, maybe this comment's bad. And it starts to become a real problem, a time eater type of question. If you've got this memorized, that's a piece of cake for you, okay? So you want to memorize this thing. That's one reason I want you to memorize it. The other reason is we're going to study what happens here in a minute if it's qualified. What happens if it's adverse, if it's disclaimer. And I'm not going to make you memorize the disclaimer. I'm not going to make you memorize the qualified. I'm not going to make you memorize the adverse. What I'm going to ask you to do is know how this changes when you have the qualification, when you have the adverse. So you use this as the foundation. Then you don't have to sit there and memorize all those other reports. You just memorize the unmodified. We're going to memorize the unqualified when we get to public companies. That's going to serve as our foundation in case we get a question that asks us directly on how the unmodified report should look, or if we get questions that ask us about the qualified or the others, adverse disclaimer, we're going to know how to tweak those reports based on our memorization of the unmodified, unqualified. Okay? All right, so you got to memorize that. Okay, do that tomorrow. Make that flashcard tomorrow and start to memorize that tomorrow. Okay? Okay, good. Now you come over. And if we are asked to do an audit in accordance with two sets of standards, okay, then we will go ahead and say, hey, we followed the government head here. We followed the what? We followed the auditing standards, the United States auditing standards, the AICPA standards, and we also followed the international auditing standards. And so you would call out both sets of standards, okay? Same thing here. If we had audited following both GAS and PCAOB, then we would go ahead and we would say that we use the what? We follow the PCAOB standards, and then we will amend the report to state that we also conducted in accordance with GAS. So PCAOB standard, the report that we're going to look at when we look at the public company report in a minute, the issuer's report in a minute, we'll default to that structure of the report, and then we'll say that we audit in accordance with both standards. And this might be the case if you have a company, and why don't you flashcard that? Okay, this might be the case if you have a company that is planning to go public but hasn't yet. So you're supposed to follow the what? The US GAS standards, the AICPA standards, but they're wanting to already start to follow the PCAOB standards. Then you'd write your report to follow the PCAOB format, but you'd also call out, hey, we followed all the requirements of GAS, since the company would not necessarily be subject to the PCAOB requirements if they hadn't gone public yet. So flashcard that. Okay. Okay, good. Now, if we're talking about issuers, we call that, remember guys, this is that green, that's that happy, right? We're right here. And if we're talking about for issuers, we call that report, when we're in the good zone, the green zone there, the happy zone, we call that the unqualified opinion. Again, I'm not going to walk you through that table because I'm just going to take you straight to the report. I think it's easier. I mean, look at that. I mean, there's so much stuff in there. You might as well go ahead and do just sit here and go straight to the report. And again, I'm going to ask you to flashcard each paragraph. Now, notice something very important here, okay? And again, let me notice it's to the shareholders, the board of directors, whatever is who that report is addressed to. And notice that we call it registered. You have to be a registered company, CPA firm, to be able to audit a public company, okay? And then you can see the opinion is the first paragraph. we start out saying that we have what? We have audited, just like that intro. So it's sort of a combination of intro and opinion, but notice that what? In our opinion, okay, the financial statements referred to above meet the what? Meet the requirements, the U.S. Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, and we call out the financial position, the results of operations, income statement, etc. Okay, so we have sort of a combined intro and then opinion paragraph, but notice we start out with the opinion. Okay, then we come over to the basis for our opinion flashcard. That is sort of like the auditor responsibility paragraph. Okay, so notice that what? It's actually a combination: auditor responsibility and management responsibility. Okay, so notice they say management is responsible for the financial statements. Our responsibility, okay, just change the blue, is to express an opinion. And the standards that we followed when we did that audit are the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board standards. So notice, and they also talk about securities laws as well, okay, the SEC and the PCAOB. So notice that here, and again, I'm asking you to flashcard. And you may need 2 flashcards, okay? And notice that here we are just specifically telling you the PCAOB. Notice the unmodified report for non-issuers just said generally accepted standards and didn't say AICPA SASs. When we get to the public report, we call out that we followed the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board requirements. Okay, and then you have to put this critical matters, and I don't like this. And what happens is they want you to generally have at least one critical matter. They say, okay, you can, when I say they, I mean the PCAOB, they say, okay, you can issue this report. You'll have the critical matter section and say none, but we'd like you to have one critical matter that you'd like to raise here. And I just feel like that's kind of forcing an issue when there may not necessarily be that big of an issue. But it is what it is. That's what they want us to do. So you have to have that critical matters paragraph there. If there's none, say none. But they kind of say we'd like you to have at least one, which to me is kind of forcing the issue a little bit. Okay. Okay, now note though that the critical matters does not, I should say, does not modify opinion. It still, or does not, I guess I could say does not qualify the opinion. It's still considered an unqualified opinion, but they make you add that critical matters. And if you say you don't have one, then you can go ahead and just say none, but then they kind of say, well, we'd like you to have at least one. So that's a pretty easy thing. Just put on your flashcard there what I just told you, which is, you know, put the critical matters paragraph, but it does not qualify the opinion, okay? But again, just like we said for the unmodified, you going to make a flashcard for every one of these paragraphs here, and then you're going to be able to sit there and recite them word for word so that you know that what if a qualification comes up, if an adverse disclaimer situation comes up, then we know how to tweak this report accordingly for those circumstances when they arise. Okay. Okay, good. Now, again, this critical matters. Again, that's kind of stuff kind of drives me nuts. Okay, but they say you must include the critical matters. If you don't have one, you still need the critical matters paragraph, but it is expected that there'll be at least one there. Okay, really? So now I got to sit here and think of something that I think is a critical matter, even if I really didn't think I had one. But anyway. They're in charge. They're the bosses. By they, I mean the PCAOB. Okay, now you come over, and in that critical matters paragraph, let's flashcard that. Okay, since we've been flashcarding the contents of the unmodified reports, unqualified report, then you might as well know what has to go in the critical matter. Since they're saying you have to have at least one, you should identify the issue, describe the principle that led the auditor to determine the matter was a critical matter, description of how the critical matter was addressed in the audit, and refer to the relevant financial statement disclosure or disclosures. I don't know who thought of this. When I say who thought of this, somebody in the PC, sometimes a PCAOB, I don't know. Sometimes they get influenced by strange people. Okay. And so I really stop, John. I don't know where they came up with this, but they want to do this, so be it. Okay. It's their world. Okay. Now you come over, and why don't we also, and we're going to see that when it comes to documentation requirements, okay, I'm going to usually ask you to flashcard documentation requirements because the exam likes to ask about, well, what needs to be documented? So was the critical matter communicated to the audit committee, how it relates to disclosures in the financial statements, okay, and whether the matter was determined to be a critical audit matter and the basis for such determination. Okay. Okay, so that's that critical matters issue. I think you can tell that I'm not in love with that, but I think we got some of the key elements. All right. All right. So now that we understand the structure of the unmodified report, okay, let's look at this dumb question. I have never seen this in practice, what they're talking about here. When I've asked for an example of how this happens, nobody can give me an example. And there is nothing in the textbook that talks about this. So this is almost a useless question here, but I'm going to go through it with you and explain the rationale. But I'm thinking, why are we bothering with this nonsense? If you get a weird, stupid question like this, just pick A, because that's the answer to this one. You know, if you get a question on the exam that you are not sure, you have no idea where it came from, okay, and sometimes they're just weird, bizarre questions. The way the AICPA gets questions on the CPA exam is they put out a cattle call for their members saying, who would like to participate in writing CPA exam questions? And people write in and say, yes, I'd like to participate. Now, if I wrote in to participate, they would say no, because you teach CPA review, so you can't be involved in a CPA review process and write the questions. But people just say, okay, I'll do it. And, you know, sometimes some nincompoop writes a question and it gets through their quality control and it ends up on the exam. You're going to get stupid, weird questions. In fact, remember that, you know, probably about 10 of your questions on your exam are going to be pre-test questions. Probably more like 5 are going to be pre-test questions, multiple choice questions that there's no point value associated with them. They're testing that question out to see if it's worthy of the exam, okay? And sometimes they'll throw a question out of the exam and never be asked again because it turns out it's not a good exam question. Then they release it, and for some reason, we decide to put it in our book here. And again, I cannot get an answer from anyone that they'll say to me, well, what is the example of this situation, please? Okay, no one has an example. I've never seen it. And nowhere in the textbook do they address it other than on this question. Okay, so here we say when financial statements contain a departure from GAAP because due to unusual circumstances, the statement would otherwise be misleading, the auditors should express an unmodified opinion. So they're telling us here, just in this question, nowhere else in the textbook, and no one can give me an example when this happens, that if the company followed generally accepted accounting principles, the statements would be misleading. Then they tell you, go ahead and let them not follow the standards and give what? And give a unmodified opinion. Okay, if you say so. Question? It's just a bad question. I think I don't know why they put it actual class question. I guess they put it here so that when you see it in your homework, you're not scratching your head saying, what the heck is this? The answer, this is a dumb, weird question. Okay, good. Let's go ahead and let's take a look now as to what happens when we go to qualified or adverse. And remember the way our chart works, guys, we get on this end, okay? Okay, so when we're dealing with qualified or adverse, that means we've got some sort of gap problem. And I want to just come all the way over and just look at the non-issuer report, okay? And this is where we're going to start to get into this approach of, well, we've got memorized already the unmodified. How are we now going to change that when we have a qualification for, and we'll do it for gap reasons, we'll do it later for gas reasons, okay? So notice that's what this table does. And now I do want to focus on this table, and I want you to flashcard the key things that this table is telling you, which is more the structure. You don't have to have all this detail in here, but the structure, which is what? Intro is the same as the unmodified report for, of course, for non-issuers, right? We're talking about non-issuers here, okay? Is the same as the unmodified intro, okay? Management's responsibility is the same, okay? Now, auditor's responsibility is pretty much the same, but remember that one little sentence that I said looks harmless enough? Meanwhile, it's a big deal because it trumpets the opinion, okay? So all we're gonna do is tweak that one little sentence at the end of the auditor's responsibility. So most of that auditor responsibility paragraph, remember I said flashcard times 2 because it was a long paragraph? Most of that's gonna be exactly the same as the unmodified. But when it's a qualified opinion, then we're going to say not the basis for our, and when it's unmodified, we just say a basis for our opinion. Now we're just going to add the word basis for our qualified opinion, okay? Then, and you don't have to have all this detail here, guys. All this flashcard is doing is giving you the broad structure. Don't put all this detail in your flashcard. The next thing I want you to put on the flashcard, the next thing you see is the basis for the qualified opinion. This is going to tell you what our problem was. They didn't follow GAAP. They didn't disclose some leases. They didn't put a green elephant on every page of the financial statements, if that's what GAAP said. My buddy was wearing Air Jordan shoes, and that's why I qualified my opinion about their interview outfit. Whatever your problem is, that's what you'll describe here. All I want you to do with this flashcard is say that that's what comes next. You don't have to put all this blah, 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 blah. Just simply say that next would come the basis for the qualified opinion paragraph. You're saying this is why I have qualified my opinion. Then comes the opinion paragraph, okay? And it's almost the same as the unmodified. Put almost the same as what's UM? Unmodified. Almost the same as unmodified, but now you have the words what? You have the words except for, and it's got to be those words, except for the effects of the financial statements of what was described in the basis for the qualified opinion. So you're going to say, in my opinion, the financial statements are fairly stated, except for whatever the problem was, the leases. My buddy's outfit is fine except for the shoes, whatever it is. And then the rest is exactly the way you memorize. Okay. So I think you're seeing the strategy here now, right? Which is what? Memorize the unmodified and then know the structure of the qualified. And it's pretty easy. The what? Intro is the same. Management responsibility the same. Auditor responsibility paragraph almost the same, except for that one sentence where you add one word to it, qualified. Basis for your qualified opinion. And that's easy for you to write that up if you get asked to, sit there and respond to a task-based simulation about a qualified, because there, all you're supposed to do is list your grievances. What is your problem? Why are you unhappy with these financial statements? Why are you sad? And then what? Then the opinion paragraph you've got memorized. That's a piece of cake. You just need to put in there now that you are going to use the words except for the effects on the financial statements. Everything else is exactly the way you memorize. Okay?
Professor,
Hmm?
I'm a bit confused among these words. Like for non-issuers, we use unmodified opinion for the normal report where there is no issue. For issuers, we use unqualified when there is no issues.
Correct.
Now this report is for non-issuers, which is on the screen, and it is using the word qualified for a modified opinion.
That's correct. Huh? That's correct.
So why they are using now qualified word? They should use modify. I'm like they are not using the word, and here they are using. It's a bit confusing.
What do you want me to do? Go beat them up?
I'm no, but how do we like learn this? It's like confusing.
Just remember it.
Okay.
If it's unmodified, that means it's the happy situation for the non-public companies. If it's unqualified, that's the happy situation for the public, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then as you go this way, we'll start with the gap problems. We go from unmodified to qualified to adverse.
Yes.
If it's a public company, we go from unqualified to qualified to adverse. And if it's a gas problem for a non-public, unmodified to qualified to disclaimer. If it's a public company, from unqualified to qualified to disclaimer.
Okay.
I mean, you heard me. I already sat here and threw them under the bus for not getting on the same page. Why did they do this to us? I don't know.
Okay.
If I was, how when President Trump changes something, he holds up an executive order and he goes, look at what I did. If I became president, I would say, now both the non-public and public companies are now going to use the same structure for the report. And I would run for office on that one issue, and I bet you'd all vote for me. Okay. So yeah, I don't like it either, but I don't know what to tell you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I agree with you. It's confusing, and they got us dancing like cats on hot tin roofs here over this. Okay. Why don't they just use the same structure for the report? Give me a break. It means the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. So you can see here an example of the report. And again, I'm focusing more on the structure. Okay. The what? And they call it intro paragraph is the same. Management's responsibility paragraph's the same. Auditor's responsibility paragraph almost the same, except now we say what? Our qualified opinion. Then comes the basis for the opinion. I don't know. This company didn't disclose something. Your buddy's shoes. I don't like my buddy's shoes. In my opinion, except for, and the rest of the way you memorize. Okay. And they go on a bit here. I have to admit here with other situations that could result in a qualification. Again, your job is going to be to understand when you have a qualification, how do you structure that report? Okay, not every single circumstance that could result in a qualification. Okay, okay, good. Now let's look at adverse. Okay, when we see the word adverse, we know we're on the gap side of things, right? When our gap problems go from bad to worse, again, flashcard the structure, which is what? Intro the same, management responsibility paragraphs the same. Big important tip here, guys. The management responsibility paragraph never changes. It doesn't matter what the auditor thinks about the financial statements. Management's still responsible for those financial statements and the internal control. So that management responsibility paragraph will not change. Okay, that's going to be the same. The auditor's responsibility paragraph then will say that what? It'll trumpet the what? The basis for the adverse opinion. Okay, so now we just simply did what? Changed the word qualified to adverse, and then we put the basis not for what? Not for qualified, but now basis for adverse opinion. What is our reasons for giving the adverse opinion? And then the opinion paragraph is almost the same. As is unmodified, almost the same as unmodified, but now we use the word because of the significance of the matters described. That's why we're giving an adverse, and we say that what? The financial statements do not present fairly. So I don't know if I should say almost the same. So let's take that off, because it's not really almost the same. Why don't we flashcard within the flashcard what that adverse paragraph says. So I want you to flashcard the structure, but then I want another flashcard that calls out specifically what goes into the adverse opinion paragraph. Okay, let's just do it that way. Okay, and that's that language right there. Okay, now, no, wait, stop. Don't flashcard that. I'll show you in a second. The key thing that I want to point out here, and put that on your flashcard. Sorry, guys. I'm gonna have you flashcard that language somewhere else. Hang on. The key thing right here on this table that I want you to flashcard from this table is, notice we don't use the word except for. We use the word because of. Because of. It's a more pointing word. Think about it. Let's say you have a significant other and you'd like them to improve. And you say, you know, you're my dream other, spouse, whatever, except for I'd like you to, you know, listen to me better. It's important, it's material. I'd like you to listen to me more. So you're good, except for you don't listen to me very much, right? You don't listen to me as well as I'd like you to. Except for that, everything's fine, right? Okay. This adverse opinion, you're breaking up with the person. You're saying, because of the time that you did this horrible thing, I'm leaving you. Because you lost our house, I'm leaving you. Because you didn't make the mortgage payments for 2 years and didn't tell me, I'm leaving, okay? Much more pointing, more significant, right? Because of this, I'm issuing adverse. Except for saying, well, I'm not happy, but okay, I understand that you did a lot of other things right. This is saying, because you've done so many things wrong, I'm leaving you, okay? All right, good. Now you come over and you look at the opinion, okay? And this is what I was trying to say. In our opinion, because of the significance of the matters, the consolidated do not represent the financial position, et cetera. And I think we're better off just going ahead and flashcarding that. I mean, it's similar to the opinion paragraph when we have an unmodified, but it's different enough that I think I just want you to flashcard the nature of the language. It's right here in that adverse opinion paragraph. Okay. Okay, good. Let's go over then. And let's take a look at issuers. And issuers now, what happens when it is a qualified, okay? And let's go ahead and flashcard the structure. You've memorized the unmodified report. Now when it gets, or I should say unqualified, excuse me, we call it unqualified for for public companies, we call it unqualified. So now when it's the qualified report, notice that it's almost the same, but we have the words what? Except for. So it's almost the same as you memorize. Almost the same as that says almost the same as unmodified, but now you have to have the except for phrase in there. Then you put an additional paragraph, okay, immediately following the opinion paragraph, and it'll give the reason for the qualification. So right after the opinion paragraph, you're going to put something that's called an additional paragraph, and it's the reason for the qualification. It's kind of like the basis for the qualification. Okay. Then what? Then you're going to give the basis for the opinion, which again is going to talk about the auditor's responsibility. That's the same as the standard report. And then if you have what? Critical matters, that's of course wouldn't change because you've had some sort of qualification, because you've already called out your reasons for your qualification here, so you don't repeat them in the critical matters. But if there were other critical matters, remember you're supposed to call out at least one, then that would be discussed down here. Okay. So what I want you to do with this flashcard, again, you've got the unqualified report memorized. Just know the structure. The opinion paragraph, almost the same, but you have to put the words except for. Then you don't do this in the unmodified. Then you do what? Then you put this additional paragraph that is the reason for your qualification. Then you put the what? The basis for your opinion, which is the same that we saw for the unqualified report.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
So for these flashcards for the qualified and modified opinions, we should know the order of the paragraphs, and if the paragraph is different from the paragraph in the unmodified or unqualified opinion, and what is the difference?
Correct. Yeah. So when you looked at these tables, because remember there was those long tables for the unmodified, unqualified, I said, don't worry about that because you're going to memorize the opinion. So for those tables, I just had you, I didn't look at those tables even. I just have you go straight to the opinion, memorize that opinion. And then we kind of started focusing on the tables for the qualified, because now I want you to take your memorization of the unmodified, unqualified, and then know how to tweak it for these circumstances. So yes, know that it's almost the same except for. Now, you know, you add an additional paragraph. Notice it's being called additional because you don't have it in the unqualified, right? And then basis for the opinion is the same, critical matters is the same. So you're basically knowing how to tweak the unqualified, unmodified for the qualifications here that we're talking about.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. For public and non-public, okay? And that's, to me, the most annoying thing is that they can't get on the same page, okay? But you can see here, there's the opinion. This is the, what they call the additional paragraph. This is saying why, essentially. I've given the qualification here. That's that additional paragraph. And then, of course, the basis for the opinion is the same. And the critical matters is the same. And notice in the opinion, we say what? We say except for. The rest is the same as we saw for the unqualified. Okay. Adverse. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at that. Adverse And flashcard, the structure again, opinion, and flashcard here that because of, right? So, you know, I'm complaining about the differences. Let's celebrate the similarities. Notice that both the non-public and public companies stick to that, except for wording for qualification and because of wording for adverse. Okay. And then what? The additional paragraph. Now, instead of explaining the reasons for your qualification or explaining the reasons for your adverse, and then the basis for the opinion, the critical matters don't change. Okay. So flashcard that structure. You got to use the words because of. And let's just stick with our game plan that we did for the non-public companies. For the adverse opinion, let's just go ahead and flashcard the specific words in our opinion. Because of the effects the financial statements do not fairly present. Let's just go ahead and get that wording memorized, since that wording is different enough from the unqualified and qualified, frankly, language. I think for the adverse, it's worthwhile to flashcard that specific wording. Okay. All right, guys. So again, let's stop for a second. Just understand our strategy here. Okay. Just so we understand our strategy. We are, remember what we're doing here. And sometimes the students will say, well, John, you know, the way you're doing this, you know, I'm not learning about all this. I'm just getting ready for the exam. That's right. You're getting ready for the exam. I'm not sitting here trying to, you know, make you a perfect understanding of all the auditing. That's the auditing class. Okay. Here we're understanding how are we going to, what is our strategy for passing the exam? But let me tell you something about doing what you're doing. Okay. You're going to go through all this. You're going to understand the way all these reports work. You're going to be, you know, doing all the problems and the flashcards and all that. And then all of a sudden, somebody's going to ask you, well, what does it mean of the adverse? And you're going to say, well, adverse means because, and all of a sudden you're going to be like, hey, I know how this stuff works. Okay. So trust me, all of this is going to come together. You are not going to be the same after you get done studying for the CPA exam. You're going to be at a higher level than you are now after you get done doing this stuff. But we're getting you up to that point through the strategy as to how to pass the exam. This is what the AICPA wants. This is what the state of California wants. They want to see, hey, are you at this higher level? Have you lifted your game up to this higher level through preparing and passing the CPA exam? And this is our strategy for accomplishing that goal. Okay. All right. So our strategy is what? Our strategy is that we're going to sit here and we're going to memorize the unmodified, the unqualified. Why don't they use the same word? I don't know. Unmodified for non-public companies, qualified for public companies. Then when our what? When our gap problems, okay, start to come up, qualify, okay. We're not going to memorize those reports. We're just going to know what are we supposed to do with those various paragraphs as the situation arise, and then do we know what to do to the unmodified, unqualified report if the problems go from bad to worse, go from qualified to adverse. Okay, and remember, we're going to deal with these two sides of the chart separately. We're going to deal with gas qualification and disclaimer in a minute. Okay, now, is there a question on that? Okay. Okay, good. So let's come over. And I'm going to put the poll up and I'm going to go turn the light on because I think it looks weird. Like you see this head floating in the dark here because I got a light shining on my face and no light behind me. So I am going to relaunch the poll and let you work on that when I go turn the light on. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And good result, I think, in that, you know, the whopping 85% of us got it right. I was thinking I was going to get to celebrate 100% correct on this question, because when you look at this one, where's my, okay, when you look at this one, I mean, you've got to focus on include and report when expressing a qualified opinion. And even though they said, what would a non-issuer do? It'd be the same for issuers in that what? Both had the phrase except for. Okay, so I look and, you know, a couple of us picked A here. Nowhere did we say subject to. I mean, we never even used that phrase. And we never said with the foregoing explanation. That was never anything that we looked at. We had the phrase what? Except for, yeah, that we had in there. So again, it's key that you pick up those key words. You don't have to rememorize the report just because it goes to a qualification, but those key words that we talked about, you do need to know those. And the key phrase there was the except for in the opinion paragraph. Question? Okay, guys, again, this is all about getting ready for the exam, so don't just slough off and pick the first one you see that sounds kind of maybe like it might be right. Practice like you're taking the exam. Read through these. Pretend like you're actually on the exam trying to get these right. Okay? Okay, good. Let's go ahead then and let's take a look at what happens when we have a situation due to a now audit issue. So notice we're now, and I'm just going to write it in again. This is the gas side. This is the gap side. So now we're over here. And when we're over here, we're trying to decide between whether we should qualify or disclaim. When we're on the gap side, it's between qualified and adverse, and it is a matter of auditor judgment. The AICPA doesn't come in and say, well, if you have this many audit issues, then you go from gas qualification to disclaimer. It is an auditor judgment. What is the pervasiveness? How important was that audit procedure? Okay. Now, when we look, there are going to be scope limitations, okay, that will result, when we say scope, audit limitations. In fact, I'll just write the word examples of audit scope, okay, audit scope, that says audit scope limitations that will result in a qualified for gas reasons or disclaimer for gas reasons, okay? Now, when we look at the causes of these audit scope limitations, okay, could be by circumstance, could be imposed by management. Management imposes a scope limitation on us, okay? Now let's just go back up though to this example, inability to observe inventory. So what happens? Let's say you hire me to do your audit of your 2020 financial statements, but you don't hire me until February of 2020, okay? Now, if you don't hire me until February of 2020, do I know what your beginning inventory was for 2020? No, beginning to a calendar year start. Your what? Your beginning inventory for 2020, frankly, I should have observed that at December 31st, 2019. You hire me February 2020. Well, how can I sit there and observe the beginning inventory / last year's ending inventory? And that could present a problem, because what happens? You sit here and you say, well, beginning inventory which I was not there to see. That's my auditor. I made his eyes big, but he wasn't there to see the beginning. Plus what? Plus purchases gives me goods available for sale minus what? Ending inventory is how I calculate cost of goods sold. Now the ending inventory, this beginning inventory would have been taken at 12/31/19. The next day is 1/1/20, right? Okay. And then the ending inventory is taken at 12/31/20 if we make it to the end of this year, the way we're going. Okay. So you have what? You would sit there and yeah, you would be able to observe the ending inventory here because now you were hired in February of 2020. You were around at year end and you could observe that. But you still have the problem that what? You really might be worried about giving an unmodified, unqualified opinion on cost of goods sold and therefore on the income statement because of this scope limitation, right? And in this case, maybe it's imposed by circumstances. Now look, if management hires you February 1st, and you say, well, look, we have this problem because we're supposed to observe the inventory. Beginning inventory is critical in calculation of cost of goods sold. How about you propose to management, how about we retake the inventory at February 1st? Now, if management goes along with that, you might be able to back into what the beginning inventory must have been, because maybe there's not a significant amount of activity in January, and it's easy enough for you to take the inventory February 1st and satisfy yourself as to what the beginning inventory was. We call that an alternative audit procedure. Okay, good. We're all good, and we can go ahead then and maybe give the unmodified, unqualified on the income statement, et cetera, right? Now, if management refuses and they say, no, we don't want to retake the opinion, well, that would probably be what? That would probably be a scope limitation then imposed by management. And that could result in, again, we're on the what? We're on the gas problem side. This could result in a qualified, or if it was really pervasive, a disclaimer. Okay. Question. Okay, now, sometimes we will become associated with financial statements and we are not going to issue an opinion on those. If that's the case, then it is a requirement that we automatically disclaim an opinion. Okay. Now, this can happen that we become associated with financial statements and we aren't going to give an opinion, and they tell you if you become associated with the financial statements, but you're not going to render an opinion, then you must disclaim an opinion. In other words, they don't want auditors sneaking around public companies and nobody knows they were ever there. Okay, if you become associated with financial statements for some reason, then you will have to issue a disclaimer. Now, even when you issue that disclaimer, we're going to see that you still must read the financial statements for obvious errors. The disclaimer must accompany the financial statements, or there must be some sort of comment right on the face of those financial statements that you're disclaiming. Each page of the financial statements is going to be marked unaudited. And if you find an obvious error, you're going to add a paragraph to your disclaimer calling out what the obvious error is. And if the client refuses to accept these, this modified disclaimer that calls out the problem, the auditor will withdraw. So flashcard all that. If somehow you become associated with a public company's financial statements, PCAOB says, well, guess what? You can't just sit there and act like you never became involved with those. You must disclaim an opinion, and your disclaimer has to follow these rules. Okay, flashcard that. Okay, good. Now, let's take a look. And here we go again. Now looking at the form and content of the report, first for non-issuers, let's flashcard the table. Okay, again, through analogy to the unmodified, which is what? Intro paragraph is the same. Remember, I told you management's responsibility paragraph never changes. You don't change management responsibility just because you've gone now to a gas qualification, okay? Auditor's responsibility, and notice something interesting, guys, here. The auditor's responsibility paragraph, that one little sentence down there that just said the basis for our opinion, now it's saying the basis for our qualified opinion, but notice it doesn't say gas qualification. So up until now, this is exactly the same thing you would do if it was a gap qualification. You just say qualified opinion. Now what changes, and I don't even know that that's really much of a change, in that you bring in the basis for the qualified opinion, just like you would if it was a qualified for gap reasons. But of course, the reason you're going to describe is the gas qualification. So the structure of the report is exactly the same. It's the content of the basis for your qualification that's obviously going to change. Instead of it being a gap reason, now it's going to be what? A gas reason, okay? And then when you issue your opinion paragraph, when you write that opinion paragraph, now instead of saying except for the effects of the matters described, now you're going to say the possible effects of the matter described, because the issue is that you weren't able to identify potential misstatement because you weren't able to apply the audit procedure. So you'd say, except for the possible effects of my buddy's shoes, whatever they end up being. For all you know, he's going to go over to the shoe store and pick up a pair of penny loafers. He thinks it looks great for the interview. Meanwhile, you'd say, no, 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 get yourself some lace-ups, whatever, right? Okay. So in that situation, you wouldn't be able to call out exactly what's bothering you because you weren't able to do the audit procedure to find out what was bothering you. But that's your point. There might be something wrong, and I was not able to identify that potential something because I wasn't able to apply all the audit procedures. But again, the important thing here is notice how similar that structure is to what we did for the gap modification, but now it's a gas qualification here. Okay. Okay, good. Now when we look at the report itself here, notice now it's a gap, it's a gas problem. I don't know, they weren't able to get the audited financial statements of some investee or something, whatever the problem is, okay? You'd call that out and then you give your qualified opinion. And again, it's got the phrase except for again, but now instead of saying except for the problem that I found, which is what's happening in a gap, it's the possible thing I would have found had I been able to do the audit procedure when you're on the gas side. Okay, all right, good. When it is a disclaimer, okay, for disclaimer, let's flashcard, and now we're going to flashcard some details here, guys, because they changed the disclaimer enough that I need you to flashcard some of the details. Okay, so intro paragraph, but now say we were engaged to audit. Don't say we audited because you're disclaiming an opinion. You're pinned all the way now on your scope limitations, right? Your gas problems. You think things are so bad that you can't even give an opinion on these financial statements. Well, now don't say that you audited the financial statements, say we were engaged to. Management's responsibility paragraph does not change. Auditor's responsibility paragraph, okay? And what I want you to do is highlight this in flashcard, this whole thing. Because now you really limit what you're going to say here in this paragraph. You don't start calling out the nature of the procedures and the reasonable assurance language and all those things that you put into the auditor's responsibility paragraph for the unmodified or the gap qualification or even the gas qualification issue, because apparently there were so many things that you couldn't do, you ended up shrugging your shoulders and saying, I don't know if the financial statements are materially misstated. So they don't want you to call those things out, because people want to start saying, well, geez, they wouldn't call all these things out if they weren't able to do all these things. Don't list them in there, okay? Just put this language, flashcard that, okay? In the auditor responsibility paragraph. Major change there, the auditor's responsibility paragraph. Then, in terms of the structure, you just put the basis for the disclaimer, and then what is a disclaimer, and because of is the language, okay? And we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to the example of the disclaimer. Notice how short that auditor responsibility paragraph is, and I had you flashcard that up there. And then the disclaimer, I want you to flashcard this. And what you're basically saying is we can't give you an opinion on these financial statements because there were so many things that we couldn't do. We are not able to express an opinion. Okay. All right, good. Let's go ahead. Let's look at the issuer report for our gas qualification, our disclaimer, and then we're going to call it a night. Okay. But let's go ahead. Well, we'll look at a multiple choice question, and then we're going to call a couple multiple choice questions, and then we're going to call it a night. Okay. But let's look at this, and again, flashcard the pattern. Okay. Opinion paragraph is actually what? Is actually the second sentence is modified to include the appropriate qualifying language, except for. Okay, so again, opinion paragraph comes first. The language at the beginning is the same as the unqualified for public company. And then the second sentence says except for, right? Then you put the additional paragraph that explains your reason, your basis for your, and that's that additional paragraph that explains, comes right after the opinion paragraph, just like we saw for the gap qualification, guys, but now it's a gas reason. You'll call out what that gas reason was, the basis for your opinion. There was some audit procedure that we couldn't perform. The rest is going to be just like the, there's some audit procedure we couldn't perform, but the rest is going to be just like the unqualified opinion. And then the critical matters is the same. Again, flashcard the pattern. Okay. Then you come down. You see that they were unable to obtain some evidence. That's that additional paragraph. Basis for the opinion. But now you're going to say what? Except for what I just told you I couldn't do. So that's a little different than what we saw for the gap qualification, because with the gap qualification, you weren't calling out something that you couldn't do. Whereas here, now we're going to have to say there were some procedures that we weren't able to apply. And then again, the critical matters is going to essentially be the same. Okay. Okay, if it is a disclaimer, let's go ahead and flashcard key elements of the disclaimer. And again, here, make sure you remember that what? We were engaged to. Therefore, we are going to disclaim an opinion. Additional paragraph that talks about the reason for your disclaimer. Basis of disclaimer is going to be a long list of things that you don't like. So don't say in there our responsibility is to express an opinion, because you're not expressing an opinion. The critical matter section, flashcard should be omitted. Now we're simply going to omit it. Okay. And when you look at the disclaimer, notice we say we were engaged to audit. There's our disclaimer. We do not express an opinion on the financial statements. Okay. When you come to the basis, the reason that you are disclaiming, the basis for the disclaimer, what was it that you weren't able to do? PCAOB says we're supposed to do these things, we weren't able to do them. Okay. If you're not independent, just say you're not independent and don't say a whole lot more. Okay. Okay, you've got this table. I don't think this table is particularly helpful because we've got our approach of looking at flashcards for the structure. So let's just go ahead and before we look at this question, let's just remember our strategy. We're going to do what? We're going to memorize the unmodified, word for word for word, the unqualified, word for word for word. Then what? Then we're going to know how to tweak those reports for the gap qualification, the adverse, right? And we saw how those paragraphs will change accordingly. Then we looked at what? The gas issue. What do we do for gas qualification? What do we do for disclaimer? Okay, so that's the key thing that you want, the key strategy, and you want to be able to take away those key elements that we looked at, that we flashcard. You memorize the cards, and then you can start to work questions already through module 6. So a good study plan for you for this week would be to make, for tomorrow, I guess, would be to make the flashcards through module 6 and see if you can't start to chip away at some of those multiple choice questions through module 6, okay? And then when we come back next time, we'll pick up module 7, and then your job for the weekend will be to make the flashcards, because we'll finish chapter 1 next time. And your job for the weekend will be to finish chapter 1 and finish the homework for chapter 1, etc. Your reward is we'll start into chapter 2. Okay, well, let's go ahead. Let's take a look at these couple questions and see what you are thinking about these. And I'll put the polls up for these. Okay, guys, let's take a look at this one. And Okay. We've got some work to do here. The answer here is B. Okay. The answer here is B. Okay. Most of us chose A and D. Okay. And B is kind of finishing third or second, however you want to look at that. Okay. But B is the correct answer. Okay. So let's just go ahead and let's take a look at this question. So answer here is B. Okay. But let's just take a look. And we say, which of the following circumstances would a disclaimer not be appropriate? Now, if they're telling you a disclaimer is not appropriate, are we on the gas side of the chart or on the gap side of the chart? We're on the gap side of the chart because disclaimer is not down there. It's what? It's unmodified, unqualified, qualified, adverse. So they're saying there's a problem that is not a audit problem, it's an accounting problem. It's a gap problem. Okay. Now, once you understand that, the auditor is unable to determine amounts associated with an employee fraud scheme. Well, there's nothing that talks about disclosure or accounting around an employee fraud scheme. The auditor would what? Want to find that. And if there was a scope limitation, an audit issue that didn't let you find that, then your choices would very well be between qualified or maybe even a disclaimer. So disclaimer would be appropriate there. This is saying where is a disclaimer not appropriate? And I noticed that a bunch of A, you read A and you went ahead and chose that. Stop doing that. Stop reading that first answer and thinking it's okay because it half-assed makes sense to you. No. Read all the choices. Get in that habit. Read all the choices. I don't care if you see God waving at you saying, yeah, A is the answer. Continue to read through the rest of the answers, okay? Because then you read B, and it says management does not provide reasonable justification for a change in accounting principle. And the rule is that they can change their accounting principle. The accounting rule is you can change your accounting principle if you're justified in that change. If you're not justified in that change, you can't change your accounting principle. In other words, you would be out of compliance with generally accepted accounting principles if you changed your principle and were not justified. That's a gap issue, okay? But that one's kind of subtle. Again, the strategy here is to read through all the choices. So you're thinking, oh, I'm not even sure I know what B means. Let me keep reading. The client refuses to permit the auditor to confirm certain accounts receivable. That's a scope limitation imposed by management. Management is refusing to permit us to do something. I might very well be on the disclaimer side because now I've had a limitation imposed by management. The chief executive officer is unwilling to sign management representation letter. We haven't talked about management rep letter, and we won't for a while, but it is a required piece of audit evidence. So if management refuses to give me something, that's a scope limitation imposed by management again. So then you look back and you're like, well, wait a minute. The only one that really talks about accounting principles that would have me on the adverse, qualified to adverse side of the chart is B. Okay. Question on that one? Okay, key thing, read through all the choices, all right? I want to see you read through all of these on this next one. Now, don't just pick the first one and say, okay, that's good enough, okay? Read through and make sure you're sure, remembering the key things that we talked about here for this one. We're a little bit over, guys. Hang in there, okay? After this one, we're going to stop. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll so that we can get out. Okay, and I guess I'm going to ask you if you're messing with me. Okay, because nobody picked A. So that means that nobody thinks it's a no for management responsibility or basis for the opinion when we have when qualified opinion due to the inability to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So we have a gas issue. Okay, an audit of a non-issue should include the reasons, and everybody knew or nobody liked A. Okay. But then there were a couple people, 4 or so of us, that wanted to think that B or C could possibly be the right answer. And I got to ask you, what part of that you never changed the management responsibility paragraph did you not understand? The management responsibility paragraph stays the same no matter what. So if you didn't like A, then I'm thinking you went down to D, which most of us did. 81% of us did. You would go down to D and say, okay, well, then it has to be D here. Management responsibility paragraph is never affected, but yes, we would what? We would add a basis for our qualified opinion paragraph when we have this sort of scope limitation that causes us to qualify. So our intro paragraph would be the same. Our management responsibility paragraph is always the same. Our auditor responsibility paragraph, which they didn't ask me about here, is almost the same, except that one little sentence will say, here's the reason for my qualified opinion. And then I would go ahead and give my qualified opinion. We would add the basis for the qualified opinion paragraph in there. Okay. So I'm not sure why you would think B or C. If someone wants to share with me why they thought B or C is good, you never changed the management responsibility paragraph, ever. Management does not get off the hook for their responsibility, ever. Okay. Okay, guys, good work. A lot of information there. Make those flashcards for the first few modules here up through chapter, or I should say module, up through module 6. We'll pick up module 7 next time. If you can, see if you can start to knock out some of the multiple choice questions for those first 6 modules, okay? Make sure you are registering for the exam. Make sure you're ordering your information from Becker. I will check into the couple of folks that haven't received that email yet. Okay? All right, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Professor
Uh-huh.
Nikki.
Hi, Nikki. How'd it go?
I guess it went good until the last test list. I don't feel confident about that. And what I did feel was the authoritative literature questions, and I had a few of those. I think I was spending most of my time researching that, and for some reason they kept on going back to the same spot. So I don't know if it was their system or, because when I was practicing, I knew I was good at that, and so I would knock them out first. I would look for them in the testlet, and I would knock it out first and manage my time. And that happened to me with the last testlet, but I spent like good 10 minutes on that question. Then it kept on going back to the same spot, and I knew where that question came from, what topic was it, and I tried researching like I put in different words, and it just kept on going back to the same spot. So I at that point I was like, maybe it's the system. Then I left it blank, and I moved on. So I don't feel confident about the last testlet, but overall, I think it went.
Kept going back to the same. What do you mean?
Yeah. Like, I don't know if I can say like what it was about, like what's.
Oh, wait. Hang on 1 second. Sorry, one moment. Oh, don't cry, Nikki. It wasn't that bad.